But again, I think it's paramount that, our folks are on the floors. They're already there. They already have those connections. It's my responsibility to make sure that they make one. And so I'm trying to come up with ways to make sure that they can make a connection, because people think that just because you're supply chain, you cannot have a patient experience. And that's simply not true. You can. You just have to go about it a little bit differently.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this episode of Power Supply, we are going to be speaking with Lisa Farmer, Corporate VP of Supply Chain at Baptist Health in Arkansas. Gary, this is an inspiring conversation we're going to be having today with Lisa. It's focused on culture change, and in a world where it's difficult to recruit and retain employees and also manage the potential for burnout because of the demands on supply chain having never been greater over the last several years. Lisa's going to share her story for really inspiring her workforce, her team members, and helping pull everybody together, and also getting them to understand how important it is and how achievable it is for you working in supply chain to have your own patient experience that will align you with mission. And Gary, mission, there it is, your favorite word. I can't wait to talk to Lisa today.
I'm excited to hear mission. You know that, Justin, about the patient first and foremost. And hey, sneak peek. I'm curious about this llama. You've sent out an outline about what we're talking about today, the llama. I can't wait to hear what this is all about. Something about Fred the llama. So looking forward to Lisa and what she's got to say about supporting the patient and the mission.
All right, we're going to be right back in a couple of minutes with Lisa Farmer and Fred the llama.
I'm Hayes Walter.
This is Gary Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A production of 17 Studios. You're listening to Power Supply.
Lisa Farmer joining us now. We're going to be talking about culture change, and whether you like it or not, this has been forced upon many healthcare organizations over the last several years. We're going to hear Lisa's story about that today and what she's done within her organization to help support culture change and reinforce it. So it's one thing to start an initiative. It's another to really help make sure that it's sustained as you move forward. So Lisa, thanks so much for coming on the show and being willing to share your strategy here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So first off, we always love to have people talk about their experience in supply chain. And I really love your story too, because when we talk about culture change, passion and really getting aligned with mission is going to be a big theme as we go through this conversation today. And I know you have a great deal of passion for healthcare supply chain. Why don't you talk about how that evolved over your career?
Okay, so when I first got into supply chain, back when I came out of college, there was you couldn't get a degree in supply chain. I didn't even honestly know what it was. So I got a call for an interview to be a buyer at Arkansas Children's Hospital, and I went and interviewed for it, and they hired me. And so that was my first, time to dip my toe in supply chain. And I had to literally learn it from the get-go. And I remember the first day on the job, I had no training, and they said, and so they said, here's your desk, here you go. And they just turned me loose. And one of the first calls I got was from a vendor letting me know about a price increase. Of course, at that particular point, I had no clue about anything. So he tells me, hey, we're going to pass on a price increase. I was like, okay, thanks for letting us know. And went on. So, that's very different than who I am today. And I remember his response was, that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. So that was my, so from that point forward, I learned that wasn't the right thing to do. But again, it's just part of skinning your knees as you kind of come up through supply chain, which is, so pretty much what I did. I started out as a buyer and then worked my way up, and now am the corporate vice president of supply chain at Baptist Health. So.
Where did you go to college, Lisa? I noticed you. Be curious to know.
Well, I'm not a woo pig.
That's what I was thinking you might say. I thought that's what you were going to say.
My daughters go there, so I do support the Razorbacks. But I actually went to the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and that's where, So I stayed local and stayed here, and went to school here, and then went to work straight out of college. So.
That's fantastic. Well, we won't have you call the pigs or anything, so the hogs. So.
Thank you. Yeah. I can do it. I can do it if I need to.
I bet you could. You send your money over there.
Well, let's talk about the culture change. And we talked about how the pandemic really has forced many organizations to deal with this. But how did it really come up for you, Lisa, and with your team, and help us kind of understand how navigating that, because I'm sure everything was changing all at the same time. That's a lot of responsibility to lead a supply chain organization over the last several years.
Well, the funny thing is that I had been at Baptist about a year when the pandemic hit. So it was sink or swim time for me. It was like I was either going to prove myself or I was going to go right in the ditch. It was really no in between. So, man, it was all about succeeding and doing the absolute best I could. And I 100% love what I do. That's the key. I love what I do. I think every day is a good day. And I am not one of those people. I don't dread going to work. I think that I'm very lucky and very blessed in that regard, and that I absolutely love every day that I'm at work. It feeds me. There is something about supply chain that just clicks with me. It's a challenge every day. It can be, especially like I said, during the pandemic. Once the pandemic started, what you realized is that you had to very quickly assemble your critical team players, and they had to be able to execute. That was the key. You couldn't dawdle. You couldn't think. You had to just act. I mean, it was almost similar to being in a theater, like what I've heard some friends of mine who have been pilots in the Navy have described to being in a theater of war. It was very similar. You've never felt more alive in your life. I mean, you are totally wired. You're totally engaged, and you're thinking nonstop. It required out of the box thinking, because it was sort of like in Hunger Games when you see this big pile of supplies and everyone running for the supplies. That's the vision that I get for the pandemic, and the way that hospitals were having to just do that. And, the idea of hoarding and stuff, I had to, while that is an instinct to want to hoard, to hold, it's really not who we should be, right? Because we're supposed to help. And we adopted that sort of thought process as we went through the pandemic. And what I realized with Baptist Health, unlike working at a pediatric hospital, is that at Baptist Health, it's seen as a community leader. And people from the community see Baptist as a place to go for help. So we were receiving calls from schools, from police stations, from churches, from the state hospital, and nursing homes around the state, as well as some children's homes, asking for help because they couldn't ascertain PPE. And I thought, my goodness, I'm having a terrible time ascertaining it for myself. Now I'm being asked to help support a community that our usage is through the roof, and you can't get it because people all of a sudden that never wore masks were wearing masks. And so we just literally decided that it was our role as a hospital to help, regardless of who it was. So we started helping others. And as we helped others, call it karma, call it what you like, we began getting donations from other places. So we were getting support from outside, and I don't even think they knew what we were doing. So it was like reciprocation happening in real time, where we would donate masks to help organizations, and then in return, someone would donate a bunch of masks to us. So, and we found out quickly, Arkansas being a rice farming area in the areas of Stuttgart, Arkansas and such, which we do have a hospital there, the rice farmers actually use N95 masks. So having rice farmers started calling us and donating their masks to us.
Great. Hey, Lisa, can I jump in there? You know, we all remember where we were on, say, 9/11, right? You remember, you know, that those type of historical moments. Do you remember the day, the meeting? Do you remember like when you got called into a meeting and said, here's what's going on? Is anything pop to your head when I say that?
Absolutely. It was us that we started noticing we were having some trouble getting some things that were going to be necessary. And this was sort of the actual announcement that, there's a pandemic. It entered in Washington State. It would start, and Arkansas being in the center, sometimes it didn't come to us, right? It sort of fades in, from the sides. So sometimes we never see it. So we were sort of like, but we were having enough of a supply issue that we really thought we were going to have trouble supporting our OR cases. So we raised the flag and said, hey, we need to have a meeting. We need to chat about this because we are severely concerned that this pandemic that's out west is starting to impact our abilities. So we had a meeting, and at that point we immediately implemented a conservation effort. Thankfully we did, because it really saved us and it made a big difference, and everyone got on board straight out of the gate. So we were in a little bit different position because we called it out early. And we're able to navigate a little bit better because of that. So, yeah, but I do remember.
Scary times, wasn't it?
Well, when I'm having to hear that we can't get, cappers or pappers, you can't get them. One of the things we did, there's a bunch of out of the box thinking. One of the things that we did was we actually bought some welding helmets, because if you take the shield off the welding helmet, it becomes a capper. So they worked great and they were perfect. You couldn't get the other, so you had to use something. So this was a great innovative way to make that work and to protect our physicians and patients. They looked a little bit like stormtroopers, but it worked.
Innovation at its best. That's great.
Lisa, one of the things you said to me was also part of surviving that situation was finding alternatives, different pathways to be able to be successful. You just gave us a great example, but something else that you talked to me about was asking the right kinds of questions, because a lot of the products that are in use today, we didn't always have them. So, as you were exploring alternatives, can you talk about how you kind of trained your team and you yourself were trying to find alternative solutions when, there really wasn't a good answer to any given question at any time?
Right. Well, one of the things I think is problematic in supply chain, not only, especially for the folks that do the ordering, the buying, and maybe, the folks that are maybe in leadership positions that maybe have never really worked the floors. But when you come up through it you work your way from the bottom up, and you also, one of the things I encourage is a natural curiosity. If you're buying something and you don't know what it is, let's get you in the OR and take a look at it. Let's let you watch a case. Let's get you the product. Let's get a clinician to show you how it's used. Let's see if you want to maybe see how this works. Let's put it in your hands. I think that's important to know. I mean, I was on a call today about a back order, and they were asking about various products. And I immediately said, well, the equipment's probably driving it. There's this brand and there's this brand. And we have both brands because of the pandemic, because you couldn't get the product. That's the problem a lot today, is a lot of standardization has gone out the window because of you're unable to get product. So you have to get an alternative, and it's happened with equipment as well. So then that drags the tubing or whatever else goes along with it. So you have various platforms that you're having to support, which is a little bit unusual, but you need to be able to say, oh yeah, we have a couple different brands and know why. And if someone tells me, hey, what's a hotline? I know what a hotline is, but I know that because I've been on the floors. When I was a buyer and when I was a supervisor and whatever else, I would go on the floors and learn. I went to the NICUs. I wanted to know how the products that I bought impacted a patient. So that's one of the things I carry with me every day is those patients that I had direct interaction with. There are 3 children that I absolutely impacted my career at Arkansas Children's Hospital. They all 3 passed away, but they're all 3 where I was, even in supply chain, you can have a patient experience. And I think that's important that supply chain folks understand what it is that they're buying, that they're schlepping from floor to floor, and they understand that the impact at the end of the day is that patient. And if they get that, then they've got it, and you've got something special on your hands. If they don't make that connection, then you need to find somebody else.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you. You went right to where talking about mission, taking care of our patients, and really the opportunity to make mistakes with the patient on the table should be nil, should be zero. We should have redundancy. We should have backups for backups for backups, and you feel that. And Lisa, you brought it up a little bit, but I'd like you to expand on it a little bit more is, as you have a staff of 25 to 100 to 200 people, as they come in and they're on board, that patient success story, how often do you, that's an emotional tie. Hayes talked about 9/11 before and then the pandemic and how it affects someone with respiratory illness. But how do you build that mission and really the patient? You kind of talked about it like, hey, let's do a preceptorship, see a case, go up on the NICU. But is that part of your onboarding process for these young professionals coming in too, Lisa?
It's not exactly part of the onboarding process at this point. What we've done at this point is we draft a letter, and every person that comes on board gets a copy of this letter. And this letter specifically lets them know the tie between them and the patient. So they know that. Then once they're here, we put them through training, obviously go through training. And we're several months into this now, but as we develop this, one of the things we've talked about is sort of like doing an education program where we actually have our staff in a room and have someone clinical come down and show them how to do stuff. But again, I think it's paramount that, our folks are on the floors. They're already there. They already have those connections. It's my responsibility to make sure that they make one. And so I'm trying to come up with ways to make sure that they can make a connection, because people think that just because you're supply chain, you cannot have a patient experience. And that's simply not true. You can. You just have to go about it a little bit differently.
Oh, you're right.
Well, we could close the interview right there.
Wow.
That was the closing statement. We haven't even talked about the project yet. Obviously, we're not going to stop.
Love it.
But I'm just, but that is incredibly important. We talked about that passion, Lisa, and it just came out. That's why that could have been the mic drop, and we could have just, stopped right there, because you're right. That patient experience, if you really want to get that connection to what you're doing and the mission for the organization, you have to have something that matters. And especially this new group of young professionals that are coming into the industry, there's so much research on what motivates them and being connected to something of higher importance, even more so than what the salary is going to be. And all of that is very, very important. So, I think not only are you onto something with the way that you're shaping that culture, but even how you set that tone immediately. And you're going to, as you mentioned, you're going to tell right away. You'll know they're not making that connection. They're probably not going to stay. Not like you're going to let them go necessarily if they're good at their job, but they're probably not going to stay because they're not really aligned with the organization. And so I think that sets us up to really get a little bit more into the weeds in terms of what you've done to get this culture change going. And so can you walk us through sort of why you started this project? I'll just throw it out there. We're going to be talking about a llama here in a minute. How did this come about? What really teed this up? And then after that, start walking us through the steps as you began to roll this out.
Okay. So one of the things that our CEO, Troy Wells, and our CFO, Brent Ballou, they are unique and they allow us some latitude to do some stuff. So one of the things that they did was they said, we want you guys to do 20 hours of leadership development. So, we could have gone with the, regular follow the model, click on the thing and watch 20 hours or whatever that is provided. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to do something different. So one of the things that Brent suggested was something like maybe looking at books and managerial books and not really culture books, but just different books. And then so we thought about it. I talked to my team, and so it's what we decided to do. We decided to we would pick certain books. We would read those books together. And then we would convene on a weekly basis and go over the reading material and then try to bring that to reality. In other words, what we determined early on and what I wanted to make sure of is that we weren't reading just to read, just to get 20 hours checked. What we want to do is we wanted to actually get something that we could actually put into use. So the first book we read was Traction, and that's by Gino Wickman. And one of the things in the book he starts with, he says, find out if your staff know your mission statement, your vision statement. So I'm on a call, a Zoom meeting and Google meeting. And I said, hey, I asked my supervisors, my managers to participate in this. I'm like, hey, what's our vision statement? What's our mission statement? Much to my surprise, I hear crickets. I'm like, oh my goodness, we don't even know. And I wasn't sure if they just didn't know or if they were afraid to say. So someone decided to start telling me that right product, right price, right time. I told him, I said, throw that out the window. That's 1980s. Throw that out. There's nothing unique about that. I can Google that all day long. There's nothing special about that and you and Baptist Health. We have to come up with something that's special for us and Baptist Health. And that's what's important to me, is to make sure that the people that work within the supply chain team feel like they are a part of something different and something special. I don't want them to think they can go down the road and get the same experience down the road, because 9 times out of 10, if they test me on that, they want to come back. They leave, but they want to come back. And that's been my experience. But we've got to keep building it this way. And I think we're going to do it. And I think we're starting to get legs. We're getting really good legs underneath it. So when I hear crickets on the phone, I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got a problem. Problem number one. So I encouraged everyone to send me what they thought our vision and mission statements needed to be. And I got them all back. I read them all and I was like, okay. But I wanted something that was short, that was to the point, that everyone could remember. I didn't want somebody to have to memorize 4 or 5 sentences. We've got something that's very brief, that is 1 sentence, but I wanted them to be able to, they've got to be able to know it when they see it. And so what we did was we looked at what our values were, and we determined that these are our values. We identified what those values are, and those values are, number 1, and always first, is family. Whether it is your personal family or the patients and families that we serve, or your work family, because those are all families that we're a part of on the daily. So number 1, always family. So that's the F. The R is resourcefulness, because that's the nature of who we are. Empathetic, because we have to know how it feels to be on the other end. We have to be able to empathize with whoever we're serving at that time. And we have to be able to empathize with each other. And finally, we must be dependable. Thus the D. We must be dependable. If the clinicians, the patients, families cannot depend on us, then why are we there? So that's the FRED, which is Fred. So if you go around and you ask our staff, what is our mission statement? They should tell you it's Fred. And so then to help push this along, we developed a character with it. So we decided to figure out, what kind of animal. So, being in supply chain, we thought pack animal would be good. So we went with a llama, because the llama is, if you read what they are dependable, they're resourceful, and they're very family oriented animals. So we thought, well, that'll be perfect. That'll be fun. And it'll be just a fun way. My assistant is incredibly talented at animating Fred. So we have Fred for the seasons. During the summer, he wears a sun hat. For 4th of July, he had fireworks around him. So we like to have fun with it, but it reinforces that image and who we are. And I know it's getting legs on it, because just the other day I received a text from one of the other hospital administrators who was down at one of our locations, happened to go into supply chain and saw their bulletin board with all the information about Fred on it. And she sent me a text and she said, I'm a Fred too. So I was like, okay, that's working.
Lisa, roughly, just kind of give me a perspective. How many people are in supply chain with you guys, roughly?
Well, we're getting ready to take another hospital on. So I would say, including those people, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 110. About
110. So you're meeting with all of them, and they all know this message. This is all filtering down.
All of our.
Right.
Even the new hospital that we are acquiring is aware of it, and they were actually really excited to hear it, because they said it's different. So
I think the acronym is going to stick a long time. And if not this power supply episode, Lisa, you've demonstrated retention policy and hiring policy. My gosh, can I go to work for you right now? Can I come on down and interview and be a part of it? Because I'm tired of working for Hayes.
111.
Exactly.
You're not going to get a reference from us right here.
Well, it's so important. I mean, it's really important.
This is great,
because,
Lisa. I'll never forget it. It's awesome.
Well, and the workforce is shrinking and everyone's competing for these jobs. And, the number of people going to supply chain is dwindling as well. And we have new competitors in our markets, like, the Costco's and the Amazons that are drawing just the regular people away. I'm not looking for regular people. I'm looking for people with passion that hold our values, that understand the link with that patient and want to make a difference every day. And so those are the people I'm after and want to keep.
And I'm serious, and I'm in all seriousness too. Just the retention is huge with what you're drawing on emotional strings, and you're putting in awareness of, like, I'm making impact in my life with somebody, with a patient as an end result. And I don't know how that message gets across in some other institutions, but I think you're doing an outstanding job at it. So seriously, hats off.
Well, part of being dependable is knowing that people depend on you. And when you know that people depend on you, you tend to be much more aligned to the organization because you feel like it's important what you do. And you're going to second guess making a career change at a place that values your role and sees, and you feel like people depend on you to do your job. It all goes hand in hand. You talked about the llama, and that's your mascot, but you've done some things to really reinforce this messaging. And even earlier on, like you said, 110 people, that's a lot of people to get this message out to. You want to continuously make sure that everybody is, and I think also having fun with it. And I think people are going to embrace culture change when it is fun instead of just simply work. And so how did you make this fun and pull in specifically your mascot, Fred?
Well, one of the things that they hear me say this all the time is that the number one thing we're going to do, I always tell everybody, we're going to have fun and we're going to do big things. So those are things that's one of my mantras, going to have fun, going to do big things. And they know that. And I think they believe me when I say that, because I really believe that. And so I leave it to the managers and supervisors to make sure that everyone has the information. So I will land at a facility. In other words, I'll say, I'm going to go to Conway today, or I'm going to go to North Little Rock today. And I'll go in the hospital. I go in, I greet all the employees. Hey, how's it going? How's it going? Tell me who Fred is. Tell me what Fred is. And if they can tell me what it is, then I give them a little stuffed llama. And not everybody gets one. And if you can't get it straight, I tell you to go talk to your manager. As we expand this, it's important for me to create situations where our folks can have a patient experience. I have had my own patient experience at Baptist. It absolutely is. And I'm not the most demonstrative person, but it was important for me to share my story with everyone. And I continue to share that story of a patient experience that I have had at Baptist since I've been there that will continue to mark my career. And at a children's hospital, those kind of stories are usually relatively easy, but at an adult hospital, it's a little bit different. So you can't wait for those opportunities to come to you. You've got to seek them out. So I'm going to put employees in a situation where they have to seek it out and at least have a patient experience. And then they can create their own story. And for them to have that story is important because that's what's going to personalize this for them.
So Gary was kind of, talking about retention and how having this kind of like culture helps you with retention. And I know you said when they start, they read this letter. And so you're kind of setting the tone for that. How has it helped with recruitment too?
Well, Little Rock's a little bit of an odd place for recruitment, but we've actually done pretty good. And we are able to fill positions. We make it, very clear that we hire to our values and we let everyone know what those values are. These are our values. If this is what you embrace, then that's great. Then you're in the right place. If you don't embrace these 4 values, these 4 core values, then this may not be the place for you. And we would rather leave a position open than hire the wrong person, because that only costs money and time. And also, you can really, create issues in your department if you let them stay too long, especially if they're toxic. So one of the other books we read was called Move Your Bus by a fellow named Ron Clark. And so we started identifying folks, and how we identify people is very similar to that book. And we make sure people understand that, there are walkers, riders, joggers, and runners. And which one are you? no one wants to be a rider or a walker.
That's awesome. I love it. John Gordon wrote a book very similar to that too. And I love that analogy. Good job. I mean, I love your passion. Lisa, this is everybody needs to hear this. This is so good.
Well, I mean, it works for me. And when I say it, this isn't a shtick for me. It isn't something that I'm just making up. I really believe this, and I really believe this every day. And I really value my staff. I'm not above going in there. And that's what I always tell people is that titles don't matter to me. I hate sometimes that people act differently when I'm on board, when I'm standing there because of a title, but I make sure they understand that title doesn't mean anything to me. And during the pandemic, I think I showed them that. It gave me that opportunity. I was actually moving boxes right next to them and moving stuff from one facility to the other, putting it in the back of my car, bringing it over, doing whatever we had to do. Because that's what's important is at the end of the day, you're all working for the same overall good. I mean, you're all trying to accomplish the same goal, which at the end of the day is making sure that people get better.
I also recommend that book by Gino Wickman, and also another one that he wrote, Rocket Fuel, which talks a lot about different personality types and roles that are played in highly successful organizations as well. The other thing I want to throw out there, just that occurred to me as you were kind of talking about retention and mission, and, you don't really, if they go to, another company across the street because they see it as all the same, it's no big deal to you because you need somebody who's connected to that patient experience. But we see in a lot of markets where people are losing talent to outside of the industry, right? Like the Amazons of the world. And then it was also just occurring to me that anybody on your team who wants to drive a little bit north has a supply chain capital in Walmart just sitting right up there, which could really present, a lot of recruiting challenges, as much as maybe the school is also pumping out talent for you to potentially recruit into healthcare. It's also a major competitor in terms of workforce. So, maybe you want to speak to that, maybe not, but I think it highlights for me even how much more important this culture message is, especially in your market.
Well, I think what's important is, and I know this, of course, because I have two daughters also that are, one of them's getting ready to enter the workforce and after December, is that, and one of the things I see, and this is one of the things I've encouraged, the managers and supervisors is that, you have someone come out of school and no one wants to hire them because they don't have experience. Well, they're going to have to get it somewhere. Why don't we give it to them? Let's see if they have the passion, if they have the values, let's put in the time, let's train them up, because it's important that we mentor them and get them to this point, because who's going to take over as we exit? We've got to sustain our workforce. I mean, that's part of what's important for us is that, I can't focus on me. I have to focus on, everyone else. And when I leave, I don't want to, you don't want to be missed, right? That's the whole objective. You don't want to be missed. You want to be able to have people that are competent that can step right in and take over. No problem. So that the hospital's not left, with no one in that seat or having a hard time recruiting someone or having to get someone subpar. So I think that we have to be willing to mentor. We have to be willing to give folks a chance. And the reason I say that is because I was that person one day. I was that kid that came out of school and I couldn't get a job either because nobody wanted me because I didn't have experience. And finally, someone gave me the chance. And then I did well. And then someone else gave me another chance. So I remember those things. It's very personal to me. So I'm always willing to give someone a shot. If they want that shot, they have the passion, let's go.
Phenomenal, Lisa. Phenomenal interview. I don't really want it to end, but I don't know where to go next. So I'm going to say, Lisa, really great job. And also selfless of you to talk about your specific story for culture change and share that out, to the audience. Cause I think also sometimes burnout, especially right now, is a major concern. And I feel like addressing with fun and connecting, mission and that patient experience can also help prevent that burnout piece. And so there's so many reasons to do what you've done. And for you to lay out the specifics of that has been, really excellent. Is there anything though that you feel like we should add before we wrap up the interview, or anything else that kind of occurs to you that maybe we glossed over?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, I think it's important that your staff know that you care. And, you have to be as clear as possible. I mean, if they know you care about them, because that's sometimes unique too, is that a lot of people feel like that nobody cares about them and that, you're too removed to care. You don't know what we do on the daily. And I do. And I make sure that they know that. So I think it's important that we just show that we actually care.
In 35 minutes, I certainly understand and I believe that you believe and you care. And you did that really well.
I do. It's legit. It's legit. It's not, I'm not making it up. It's legit. I'm this way all the time. And
well done.
So where can people send their resumes?
Well, apparently, Gary.
I hope that they do.
Gary wants a job, apparently.
Yeah, we need an analyst right now. So.
You got a gap. We can fill a gap. You never know.
That knocks Gary out.
I love it.
Lisa, great job.
Thank you
so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Lisa Farmer, everybody, and a really great conversation, Hayes, around culture change. And honestly, we didn't say this during the interview, but for you to lead any kind of culture change, you have got to be inspiring. And if you listen to this interview and didn't walk away inspired, I'd be shocked, especially in the way that they rolled this out, made it memorable. I'll remember Fred the Llama, and I don't even work at Baptist. And I'll never forget that. So,
agreed.
Great interview.
I loved it. Matter of fact, when she hung up, we kept on talking about her passion, her culture, her leadership, all the wonderful qualities that she talked about and the things that she's implemented. And literally, I hope everybody that listens to this takes something home with them that they ought to be doing the same thing at their shop. And wonderful job. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Lisa, great job. Everybody else out there, definitely want to remind you that if you've got feedback for the show, you can send us an email to info@powersupplymedia.net. We'd love to hear from you. You can listen to these episodes on our iPhone or Android app. Just go to the Google Play Store or the App Store. Go ahead and search for Power Supply Media, download the app and listen there. But if you're already listening to podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, any of the other favorite podcast aggregation podcast apps, just search for Power Supply Media. You'll be able to subscribe. And speaking of subscribing, we want you to definitely follow us on LinkedIn. So make sure that you add Power Supply Media. But even more so, we're going to just kind of pump up Hayes's gentleman's agreement or handshake agreement that if you like what you hear, that you will share out the episode, comment on the episodes, help get this information out to others within your organization or your supply chain community, especially an episode like today's with Lisa. I think everybody can benefit from that. So if you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you share this episode out. And as always, a heartfelt thank you for everybody who tuned in this week. And on behalf of Hayes, Gary, and myself, thanks for listening to this episode of Power Supply.